He is someone that our program committee was very happy and excited to bring to you tonight. And with that, I would like to introduce Dutch from New Jersey.
Hi, my name's Dutch and I'm an addict.
Hey, Dutch.
And I'd like to thank the host committee. I think they did a hell of a job. My name's Dutch, I am an addict, and I believe I was born an addict. I knew ever since I was a small child, I was emotionally crippled. And ever since I was a small child, I had secrets. And I was very young, that became a way of life. Way before I ever picked up a drug. I grew up in a fairly normal family, and I had problems growing up, and I didn't know what to do about it. I went to bed till I was like 13 years old, and that's tough to grow up with, because I knew I was different. And long before I picked up my first drug, I was emotionally crippled. And I began to use drugs at 10 years old, and I liked it. At that age, I liked everything about it. It moved the pain of growing up. It moved the pain of living. And I didn't feel different. I was the type of kid when I went to school, they put me in a homeroom and then they sent me to a psychiatrist. Every year. And from the time I was 13 to 22 years old, I never did a year on the street. I always kept getting put away. And growing up, I tried to use a lot of things to move the pain. Besides drugs. Moving, I became a drifter. Motorcycles and motorcycle gangs. Hanging out with older gangs. And they accepted me. And I also lived another life. When I was in school, I was president of my class. I was real active in sports. And I had an athletic scholarship to college. and I never felt a part of any of it. And every decent opportunity that came my way, I blew. And all those opportunities, I started out with good intentions. And it was almost like I began a lot of things in life, and I never finished nothing. It seems like the authorities would always finish it for me. So after I got thrown out of school, thrown out of college, told not to come around, my own family not wanting to do anything with me, I started to pay more dues than what I was willing to pay, and I didn't know what to do about it. When I was 20 years old, I went to the penitentiary. And I had a choice. I could go to a rehabilitation center. And I went to this rehabilitation center and I did 23 months instead of 55 years. And the bottom line, when I left the rehab center, I got high. And I got high when I was there. Drugs had become a way of life. Removing pain had become a way of life. Even though a lot of the pain was self-inflicted. And when I was at this rehabilitation center, I met a guy. And he was from San Francisco. And he had this little white book called Narcotics Anonymous. And this was in Norristown, Pennsylvania in 1972. And with this book, we began the first Narcotics Anonymous meetings on the East Coast that we knew of. And it was only because there was no place else to go. When I had been in this rehab center, you know, they had us go to these meetings. And they had us do a lot of things that didn't make any sense to me. I could never understand how you can scream and holler at somebody all day long and try and make them cry and then tell them that you love them. And they made us go to these meetings so that we could get weekend passes. And I didn't get weekend passes, but when I went to these meetings, I knew I didn't belong there. And they told me I didn't belong there. They said that there's some of us that have grave emotional and mental disorders that are unconstitutionally incapable of being honest, and that was me. But at that time, there wasn't any place else to go. And I never heard of people that lived the way that I lived in these meetings. I never heard one time somebody selling a TV for a drink. And so when this guy came with this white book, I knew that was me. And meetings began to grow around the Philadelphia area. And we didn't have a lot of things that y'all got today, but we had each other. And the thing that smacked us in the face the hardest was the therapeutic value of one addict helping another is without parallel. And that's really all we had. We didn't know how to work the steps. We didn't know how to understand and interpret the traditions. But we had each other and we had a place to go. And Narcotics Anonymous grew. And for a long time, going to those meetings, we never thought that we would fill the room, but we thought maybe we could live. Because there was a lot of people that told us we should die. We were going to die. And they told us that we didn't belong. And out of that, we stayed together. And then they continued to grow. I know for me, I kept going because there wasn't any place else to go. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged to something. So when I hit Narcotics Anonymous at 22 years old, I was a leftover hippie with long hair and a beard. I was a social outcast. All my friends were social outcasts. I had never worked. And I didn't know how to be honest. But I believe I stole my honesty from other people. I would go to these meetings and people would talk about things that I just couldn't talk about. And I would say, yeah, that's me. And a lot of things that we did happened outside of the meetings. And like in every new area, in every new region, we had a bravado. We all had a sense of belonging. And I stayed clean. And a lot of people didn't. A lot of people would come into Narcotics Anonymous and they would never come back. And we would hear about them. So-and-so would end up in jail. So-and-so would be in a mental institution, and so-and-so died. And what that little white book said was true. For people like us, it was jails, institutions, and death. And for a lot of years in this program, I thought that it was just going to meetings. I thought being involved in activities, going to dances, going to conventions, going to a lot of meetings, being a real heavy hitter, you know, like being real honest at a meeting, being involved in service. But I was doing it my way. And I didn't think that I was. There was a saying in that little white book that, you know, we needed to become productive members of society. And that's how I tried to gauge how well I was doing in the program. And I looked at clean time as like having points. And in my area, I was one of the guys with the most points. And it was was like the people with the most points could tell the people what to do. But I didn't know how to work the steps. After a couple of years, I had gotten married to a girl in the program. I started a business. I made more money than I ever dreamed of. I lived a lifestyle that was for other people. I went to college. I got an education. I had a lot of friends in the program. Fathered 4 beautiful kids. Lived in a big house. And really thought that I had arrived. And really thought that I was a productive member of society. And in a sense, I was. But I had become the person to put all his energies on the outside, and the inside crumbled. And you know what? With 8 years clean, I didn't know what to do about it. Because by this time, I had so much bullshit, pride, and ego. And you know what? I don't mean to cuss, but you know, I don't mean to be disrespectful if I do. But I had a lot of bullshit, pride, and ego. And I didn't know how to ask anybody for help. I was one of the people with the most clean time, and I looked good on the outside. Things looked good. And when it all began to fall apart, I spent a lot of time and energy trying to keep it together so you all wouldn't think that something was wrong with me. My whole life I felt like a bad person. And I felt like something was wrong. And I felt like if I didn't look good, if I didn't have things, if I didn't keep that image together, I didn't know what was going to happen. And I didn't understand what was going on. I mean, here I was, I had been to thousands of meetings, very, very active in service. It looked like I had it all together. And just when it really looked like it was all together, it began to fall apart. And one of the clues that I had was the people that I was sponsoring started to stay away from me. And they said, if this is what it's like with 8 years clean, I don't want what you got. And they would start to ask me questions about the steps. And I would tell them that they weren't ready for it. I had no answers for them, and I had no answers for me. And it's funny, the whole time that this was going on, I still had this feeling that something was going to happen and that someday I was going to be okay. And that I kept going to these meetings because I was going to hear the secret. And all the noise would go away. Why was this happening to me? And I didn't know how to surrender. I didn't. But I went out to California and I went to a service conference. And this was about the time that our basic text was being written. And in the Philadelphia area, we had heard that, you know, some things was going on with literature, and I wanted to see what it was about. And I met people that walked the talk. And it scared me crazy. And I watched them. And I liked what they had. And I asked this man if he would be my sponsor, and he said, yeah. And he said, you're going to write. And I said, what? You know, it was almost like, do you know who I am? Write what? And he taught me about Narcotics Anonymous. See, I figured I had known. You know, coming from the East Coast with a lot of time, I thought I had the answers. But I wasn't going to tell these people anything. Because you know what? Even though like you have a whole lot of clean time, if you don't have the steps in your life, people know it. And it was like back home I could still get over on like a whole lot of people because of the time thing. But when I met these people, it was like the games was over. And I remember one of the first things he said to me, he says, yeah, I heard about you. He says, and I thought you was just a punk from the East Coast. Nobody ever called me a punk. Well, the pain had gotten to the point, and I didn't know what to do about it, and I really didn't trust anybody. I became willing. And I began to write these steps, and I didn't know what was going to happen. But I had an idea that since I had more time than this man, if I would hurry up and write all these steps, I would catch up to where he is like really quick. And it didn't work out like that. As a matter of fact, when I began to write the steps and began to work the steps and I began to listen and take direction, my life got worse. And this had been a lot of years without drugs. And my life had gotten so crazy with me being in control. And it gets really crazy when you're trying to let go and control at the same time. But I was so full of denial and self-deception that I didn't know what I was doing. I really didn't know what I was doing. But my life got worse. I ended up getting separated. I was going to get divorced. My business fell apart. All the people, except for one, that I was sponsoring didn't want to have anything to do with me. They said, you're crazy. And what happened, I ran out of time. I couldn't buy any more time. It was like dress rehearsal was over and it was time for the main show, and I didn't know how to perform. And I had no other choice but to trust this man. And I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote, and things were getting worse. I didn't want to use drugs, but I didn't want to live. I couldn't take the pain anymore. And I live in Atlantic, or next to Atlantic City. And I used to take newcomers to the casinos. And we'd play, and we would have a good time. And one night I took a newcomer to the casino. I dropped a lot of money. And after I dropped him off, driving home, I felt like a real creep. Like, this is what I'm doing? I'm supposed to be some kind of role model for this guy, to give this guy some hope? I'm killing him. And I didn't want to live anymore. And I can remember driving down the Garden State Parkway, and I put my car on cruise control, and I just shut my eyes and surrendered and counted to 10. And I can remember when I closed my eyes, I had a real peaceful feeling. And when I woke up, the car was right in the middle of the road. And it wasn't like, oh shit. It was like, I knew it was okay, that God wasn't through with me yet. And as I began to listen to these people in California, and like with my sponsor, like when he sponsors you, his wife sponsors you too. It's a trade-off, I guess, but it's good. It's good. Because like when he's not there, she clobbers you. And a lot of times, I got clobbered by both of them. See, because my way of doing things, with 8-9 years clean, I wanted to die. And I didn't have a drug in me and hadn't used for a lot of years. And you know what that is? In case you don't already, that's the disease of addiction. And I thought that after I would write these steps, that I would have an instant understanding. And it didn't happen like that. And like I said, things got worse. But then all of a sudden one day, it was like riding a bike. Something had happened inside of me that I had no control over, and I was in situations where all of a sudden things were working and the results weren't the way that they used to be. And for the first time since I had gotten clean, I knew I was working the steps. And I had about 10 years clean then. I had a lot of self-will and a lot of destructive patterns. But I knew there was hope. I know what it's like being clean a lot of years without the steps. I know what it's like being clean with the steps. And there's a difference. There's one hell of a difference between total abstinence and recovery. And as I began to get a little understanding of these steps, my life went up and down, and it didn't level out right away. Because for the first time in my life, I looked at the first step completely different than the way I had for 8, 9 years. See, because my thing was coming to NA, that all I had to do was not use and I was winning. And that was the name of the game. Just don't pick up and everything will be all right. Don't pick up and it'll pass. And I don't know where they brought it'll pass into NA, but I'll tell you what, for people like me, it don't pass. It gets worse. And things didn't pass, and things did get worse. But you know what? I wasn't in a state of despair anymore. I had this hope. And I began to have a working relationship with a sponsor that I never had. And you know what? I don't think sponsorship's talked about enough in this fellowship. Because all of our steps say we admitted. We. None of them say I. And I look at my relationship as my sponsor, as my link to you all, to my link to the Narcotics Anonymous program. And it's very, very important, not just for my recovery, for me to live. If I want to live, it's important. Because with my best resources and my best thinking, I didn't want to live anymore. And all I can tell you is that today, with the help of a sponsor, with working the steps, I want to live more than ever. I'm more grateful today than I've ever been in my life. And I can tell you what began to happen when I began to understand and internalize what these steps meant. Yeah, my life changed, some for the good and some for the bad. But mostly for the good. And for the first time in my life, I could watch the insanity that was going on in my life. And I never watched it before because I figured that I wasn't insane. To me, the only thing that was insane was using. And there's a lot of other things that are insane. And I had always looked at the first step as powerless over my addiction. My addiction was, I was a dope fiend. I don't have to describe the drugs. They're really not important. And I had become addicted to a way of life that wanted to kill me. And I thought that just not using was it. And it's powerless over our addictions. And that my life had become unmanageable. And when I'm writing these steps, I'm getting some understanding a little bit here and a little bit there. And my sponsor would say to me, you know, you need to write some more. And I was willing. This was the first person in my life that I ever respected. Because prior to coming to NA and prior to asking this man to be my sponsor, I didn't respect a person or anything. And I really didn't care. And as I began to respect this person, I began to surrender to the Narcotics Anonymous program. And I began to understand what the first step was about. And had become powerless meant that I always was, I am today, and I'm always going to be. And that things end up the worst when I try to control and manipulate a situation. And things seem to run smoother when I can get out of the way. And believe me, I didn't know how to get out of the way. But with the direction of these steps that this man was giving me, it started to turn around. I started to be able to put the brakes on self-will, destructive self-will. And things began to turn out good. One of the reasons that I feel really, really in touch with the NA way of life is that everything I did before I came into NA was illegal. Everything that my friends did was illegal. So we had like big time secrets. And when I went to go get whatever I went to use, it was illegal. So the lifestyle was illegal. I couldn't identify with people that had jobs, spouses, and went home every night. But I began to have this sense of belonging more than I had ever had in my life. I had began to understand that this sense of belonging into this Narcotics Anonymous became greater when I could surrender and be more powerless. And it was like everything that I thought, the exact opposite was happening. These steps go against every cell in my body. It's almost like everything is just the opposite. And the only way that I'm going to get good results is for me to get out of the way. And the only way that I can get out of the way is to be powerless. And if you don't know how to be powerless, get a Narcotics Anonymous sponsor. After I began to understand that I was powerless, totally powerless over your life, my life, people, places, things, and events. And it talks about in our literature that we have this void. And then we come to believe that a power greater than us can restore us to sanity. Well, that didn't happen to me at first. Because I did not believe in anything other than what I could do. And I had to believe first, before I could believe that Dutch couldn't do it anymore. And I had to accept that Dutch couldn't do it anymore. Because what I did with self-will and just trying to live took me so far, and it wouldn't take me any further. And the only way that I could go further in this program was to work the steps with the help of a sponsor. And since I had committed my life to Narcotics Anonymous years ago, I had better get a Narcotics Anonymous sponsor. And when I began to believe that Dutch couldn't run the show anymore, And before I could understand that I could get restored to sanity, I just listened to what my sponsor and his wife said. And in a lot of situations in my life, they told me, just don't react. And if you just don't react, you'll see that the results won't be destructive. And I said, that don't make no sense to me. How if I don't do nothing, it's going to come out good? But I listened. And as I was going through a divorce, and I was going through my business falling apart, and I was going through like learning how to be a single parent, and I was learning how to take an illegal business and make it legal, the results weren't destructive. And as different situations presented themselves in my life, I could still see the insanity. And I got a story, and a lot of people have heard it, and a lot of people know about it. But it's important for me to remember. I remember when Bobby told me, he says, look, let it go with your old lady. All right, I'll let it go. And the thinking that we can go through to rationalize to make things right is really insanity. And before we surrender to that insanity, and this is without a drug, this does not have to do with a drug, because the drug only pertains to the first half of the first step. With this insanity, I rationalized that if I built a tree house for my kids in my backyard, I would be like Father of the Year. And the best that I could do of letting go of this situation, 10 years clean without a drug, was to climb up in this fucking tree house at 11 o'clock at night and spy on my ex-wife and tell myself that she loved me. That's the best that I could do. And you know what? That's sad. And at that time, I couldn't talk about it because it was a secret. But unless we work these steps, unless we live these steps, the results in our life can be just as crazy as if we were using drugs. And I've come to really hate this disease. I've really learned to hate this way of life that doesn't involve any drugs at all. Because for a long time I used to put the blame on the drugs. The drugs made me do this, the drugs made me do that. I didn't understand this disease of addiction. I didn't understand how with all the good intentions in the world, the results could be destructive without using. And I'll tell you what, I'm here to tell you tonight that your life can get really, really crazy without drugs. So I began to understand by not reacting in this second step, I could feel how strong the insanity was in my life. It's like I could almost watch what would have happened. And nothing destructive happened. I went through a lot of pain. And I went through suffering as long as I wanted to hold on to it. And that's how these steps work. I'll suffer with them as long as I want. When I can get out of the way and I can listen and take direction, the results are good. And today I got hope. I know today it's going to be all right. I know today that things may be painful. But I know that I don't have to go through them alone. And it feels really good to have a relationship with a sponsor. And it feels good to be a part of a WE program. When I made a decision to turn my life and my will over to the care of God, my sponsor did it with me. And I could see in action the WE. And then when I come into rooms like this, I can feel the WE. And I can only tell you that a lot of times before I was doing that, I felt alienated and I felt isolated. And I would feel that God, not turn my life and will over to the care of God. And when I died, find out that there was one all the time. I didn't want to pay dues anymore. And it was just that simple. When the final bell rang, I would rather do right than wrong. And today, a lot of things that I do help make those first 3 steps a lot stronger. And what I do in my life helps it make me feel that it's okay to be powerless. That I can get a strength from being powerless. And that I don't have to defend a lot of things. And the basic essence that I got out of the first 3 steps, and I found out after I began to internalize them, and after I had began to write a whole lot of things and I had felt really uncomfortable and really embarrassed, that my sponsor and his old lady loved me right where I was at, and they didn't put any conditions on it. And it was the first time in my life that that had ever happened. And I knew it. Because before that, when people told me that they loved me, I didn't believe them. I didn't feel it. And I didn't know what to do with it. And all I can tell you today is that relationship has given me a really, really grateful feeling. That you know what? Nobody can take it away. Nobody. And that's one of the special things that comes from this. I didn't look for it when I first asked this man for help. I just wanted to live. And I didn't know how. And he had me right on a 4th step, and I did it. And I didn't know what was going to happen, because at this time, I was going through a really, really intense period of my life. I had cried for the first time in my life for a long time. Because the way I grew up, you don't cry. If you cried, you got beat up, and you had to move. Because if they beat you up once, they were going to beat you up every day. And it was all right. And I began to feel this thing happening inside of me, and the only thing that I can look at it today is that as crazy as things were in my life, the steps had started to become alive and inside of me. And it felt good. And I shared my 5th step with my sponsor, and I didn't do it the way I wanted it, and I didn't do it when I wanted it. And I thought that by sharing this fifth step, you know, it would like remove all this pain. And I thought it would like make me different. You know, because like a lot of us, you know, we think like the fifth step's like the real heavy. And I thought that it would change my life. And it's funny, because after I shared my fifth step with this man, he told me, he said, now go across the hallway and get down on your knees and become willing to have God remove all these defects of character. And at that time, I was really, really willing. And I was entirely ready. And I go across the hallway and I get down on my knees in this bathroom, and man, somebody walks in on me. And the guy that walked in on me is here tonight. And it's okay. And when I began to write on step 6 and 7, I kind of thought it would be like a inventory, like a 4-step. I'm still writing. I mean, I'm clean 14 years, I'm still writing. And if he tells me to write tonight, I'll write. Because I believe that the steps is the only way that I can be the best human being I can be. Believe me, I've tried everything else. I tried everything that it was in my power to take the noise away, to move the pain. And I don't even have to identify them. We all know what they are. And it took 8 to 9 years before I ran out of time. And a lot of that had to do with we didn't have literature. We didn't have step meetings. We didn't talk a lot about sponsorship. Our meetings weren't recovery oriented. We really didn't care about the traditions. We really didn't have a service structure. And when I was first getting clean, we got by any way we could. And today that doesn't work anymore because there's a Narcotics Anonymous way of life. And there's no excuses. If you don't want it, that's on you. If you want it, go for it. When I look at people working the steps, I can only tell you this. The losers do what they want, and the winners do what they're told. And like I said, I'm still surrendering to being this entirely ready. I can't tell you that I'm up here 14 years and I worked my 6th step and it's all over with. I'm still writing, I'm still working on it. And I'll tell you how powerful these steps are. God really knows we're full of shit. Because just when we think we got step 6 done, we hit step 7. And it says humbly. And humbly to me, please, God, take this pain away. Please, I'll do anything. And that's usually after I thought that I had it together in some area of my life, and all of a sudden it becomes unraveled and crazy again. And that shortcoming to me is that I just come up short. It's just that simple to me. And God knows that I'm going to come up short, and that's why He made step 7 the way it is. because he knows that I'm a human being. And he knows that I may think I'm entirely ready, but he knows that I'm an addict, and he knows the self-deception, and he knows the denial, and he knows that maybe I ain't going to tell my sponsor everything that's going down. So he gives me step 7. And when the pain's bad enough, yeah, I'm real humble. And when I write about making a list, I wrote a list out of all these amends for step 8. And that wasn't the way I wanted to do it, and it wasn't in the time that I wanted to do it. But like some time had passed, and he says, I think you're ready for step 8. Make a list. All right. All right. So I took this list to him and I said, well, here's the list, but like these 3 people, there ain't no way in hell I can make amends to them because they'll kill me. And he says, Dutch, look, if your recovery depended on you making those amends to those 3 people, how willing would you be? And I became willing. And I began to make the amends, and I'm still making them. And I'm still making a list. But I know this today, that the stronger I work step 6 and 7, the less amends I make. And it's the reason that they're laid out the way that they're laid out. And I got to be honest, with step 10, I don't sit down every night and write no inventory about like how the day is. My life's pretty full, and that's no excuse. But if something's not right in my life, I try to take care of it before I go to sleep. And if that means making a phone call. And I'm the type of person, I've had to make a lot of amends. And I'm the type of person that doesn't get a lot of amends back. And it's me with my defects, and it's me with my shortcomings that keeps me making a list, and it's me that has to do the amends. And all these steps are spiritually linked, and I finally figured out that if I would put more emphasis on 6 and 7, 8 and 9 wouldn't be so painful. And when I say be painful, I mean that today. I don't take the steps once and forget about them. If I need to use the steps today, so be it. But if something's not right in my life, I like to take care of it. I like to answer my phone, and I like to sleep. And before I could admit that I was wrong, I would stay up at night worrying, and I would be afraid to answer my phone. And then step 11 is like a combination of all the first 10. And you know, we talk about spiritual principles and this being a spiritual program. And you know what? I've never seen a spiritual principle. And yeah, this is a spiritual program. And I'll be honest, I don't know the 24 spiritual principles and how they fit into this and that. I know that honesty, open-minded, and willingness is very important for all of them. All the steps and all the traditions. And they seem to fit in all of them. But I had a hard time understanding what a conscious contact was. I had never seen a conscious contact. And I was always the type of person, I want to know what I'm going to get out of it before I do it. You know, I'm a dope fiend. I want the most for the least. And I struggled with step 11 because for a long time I sought more through prayer than I did meditation to seek a conscious contact. And even though the steps said meditation, it was easier for me to just pray. And I wasn't comfortable with getting away from everybody and getting quiet and trying to get real still inside. But today when I do that, I can get this conscious contact. It's kind of elusive. And I can feel the joy of the steps. That I don't have this noise in my life, and I can get this conscious contact. This sense of being as a result of the prior work with the steps. I can get that. And some days it takes me a while to get it. And other days I don't even try to get it because things are going along fine. But it was real important for me to get this conscious contact with this God of our understanding. And it came real hard, and then all of a sudden it became real easy. Because I really wanted this Narcotics Anonymous God that we have, this loving and caring God, to be the big force in my life. I didn't want to do it my way anymore. And the more that I see the results of the steps working in my life, the more I want this conscious contact. I mean, I don't want to be no spiritual guru. I want to be able to live my life hassle-free. I want to be able to live my life with no destruction. I want to be able to live my life and not hurt people. And I want to be able to live my life and be able to love people. And you know what? I couldn't even say that word love for a lot of years. And I can love people today. I can hug a man today and tell him I love him. I can hug a woman today and tell him I love him. And there's nothing sexual with it. And that's not me. I'm not capable of loving anybody. But when I begin to work these steps, and when I put these steps in my life and they become alive, and situations come up and all of a sudden, bam, the steps are in action. Even though I may not like what's going on, I'm capable of loving somebody. And that has never happened in my life before. It was always get even, get over, and get by. And recovery to me is the pain and the joy of living. It's not the erotic highs and it's not the suffering. It's just the simple pain and joy of life. And the first 11 steps take me to God. They're like a road map. And my sponsor's like the guide. He's been there before. And I trust his experience. And when I first began to trust this man, that's what I trusted. I didn't trust him. I didn't trust anybody, but I trusted his experience. And it was enough to go on. And having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, I've had a lot of spiritual awakenings. And the most simple spiritual awakening is that I'm just not the way that I used to be. And the most profound spiritual awakening that I have in my life is that I've been clean without the steps and I've been clean with the steps, and there's one hell of a difference. And the 12th step gives me a responsibility of carrying what I learned through the first 11 to somebody else. And that's a real joy in this program. And like it or not, like those new people that came in here tonight, it's so easy to love them where they're at. There's a joy in that. There's nothing hard about loving a newcomer and telling them, baby, you'll be okay. But it does become hard when I begin to miss meetings and I begin to miss intimate personal contact with other people in this program. And I began to put money, property, and prestige before all of that. And it's almost like I begin to retrogress back through the steps, because no longer am I taking the journey of recovery inside, I'm taking it outside again. And I'm not taking my inventory, I'm taking your inventory. And I ain't turning my will over to nothing. And there ain't nothing higher than me. And I ain't powerless. And I've been there a lot of times. When I'm there, it's hard to love a newcomer. And that has happened to me a lot of times. I would get so far, and then I would retrogress back. And then I would have to go so far again, and then I would go back. And today I don't have to do that. And that's the joy of these steps. That's the joy of knowing that I'm working the Narcotics Anonymous program. And that's my responsibility, to carry that message to that person. And when I say joy, that means I want to. And I believe if you feel that you have to carry a message of recovery, something's not right. If you feel you have to go to meetings, something's not right. And that's only because I've been there. And today I want to go to meetings. I like my involvement in this program. I can say tonight that I have never had a passion for anything in my life that I've had for Narcotics Anonymous. There isn't enough money, there isn't a drug as good out there, and there ain't a woman alive that's better than this. It's better than this. And a lot of that had to do with just doing things that I didn't want to do and being willing. And I believe what my sponsor says, that if I'm willing, 1%, God will do the rest. And that's so easy after you do it. But you know what? Some days it's really tough to be willing. And a lot of days I don't feel like calling them. But you know what? When I get in the habit of doing it, it's easier to do it. And I'm willing to listen and take the direction that He gives me. And in turn, I can give the same direction that I get, because I don't tell the people that I sponsor what I think. I tell them my experience. And I'll tell you, I'm tough. Because I figure if I'm still writing with 14 years, and you got less time than me, and you ain't writing, no good. You got no excuse. And that's the way I like it. I don't like to tell somebody to do something if I'm not walking it. And the more that I began to understand what the steps of Narcotics Anonymous was about, the more that I began to understand how they were all spiritually linked. And I began to understand that the more that I worked step 6 and 7, the stronger steps 1, 2, and 3 came. And that the more that I could admit that I was wrong, the more that I could feel that I was powerless and that it was okay. And that they're all linked together. And yeah, this is a program, a spiritual program. And it involves spiritual principles, and I can't see the spiritual principles. But you know what? I can't see the disease. I cannot see the disease of addiction. If I could see the disease of addiction, I could just move out of the way like a truck was coming at me. But I can't. And I've learned a lot of things about revenge and retaliation. And I can tell you tonight that the best revenge for this disease of addiction is working the steps. And it's the easiest way for us to live. A lot of other ways may get us by, but they become painful. And after I began to understand about these steps, they allowed me to understand about the traditions. I understand unity today. I understand a little bit about the traditions. And I'll tell you what, before I began to understand what the steps was about, I thought I knew what all the traditions were about because they said that they were non-negotiable. They were non-negotiable as far as I was concerned. And they were going to be non-negotiable as far as what I was going to tell you. And as I began to understand about the steps, and I began to understand that if there's a Narcotics Anonymous tomorrow, I'll be all right. And that my personal recovery depends on unity. And that unity begins with loving each other where we're at, not where we want each other to be. And I never understood that. And that's one of the joys that I've been able to experience. And as long as I can look at it like that, I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that we have Narcotics Anonymous tomorrow as a person. And there's a lot of other people that are here to make sure that Narcotics Anonymous is going to be here tomorrow. We're no longer a fellowship of maybe we're going to be here. I'll tell you, we're the future. And I began to understand about language. For a lot of years, when I came to Narcotics Anonymous, I was straight. And then they began to print literature. And I didn't understand what was going on because I felt like they were changing the rules on me. And when the changes began to happen in Narcotics Anonymous, I was probably one of the strongest resistors that they had. I fought the change. And I would go to meetings and I would keep identifying myself the way that I identified myself. And I would say that I had what I had in relation to clean time the way I wanted to do it, because it had worked for me for a lot of years before these people had ever come around. And these newcomers would come up to me and they would say, "Dutch, we love you anyhow, but you're clean." And I believe that the terminology has a lot to do with unity. I used to think that language was for people that wanted to pick up on it. But there was a certain language that whatever we used to get by worked. But I know that there's a difference. I know when I identify myself as Dutch and I'm an addict, and somebody else identifies themselves as an addict, I feel unity. And that has to do with surrender to the Narcotics Anonymous program, not any other program, the Narcotics Anonymous program. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to any other fellowships, but I don't feel the same unity when other people identify themselves as other things. I've been all around this country, and I've done a lot of soul searching, and I believe the language that is coming out in our literature today, and it begins with identifying ourselves as an addict, and that we have clean time, and that this process is called recovery, is the future. I don't feel guilty for my origins. I don't feel guilty for where I first wanted to go to save my life. But I'll tell you what, I can tell you tonight, I feel damn glad what I'm doing about it today. And that's living Narcotics Anonymous. And my story's pretty simple. It's not real complicated. If you don't work the steps, my experience is it's painful. It's less painful to work the steps. And I lived my whole life dodging pain. I lived my whole life trying to move pain. And I used to think that step 4 and step 5 was the heavy hitter in this program. And it's more painful not to do it than it is to do it. And that carries out through all of our steps. And when we get into the traditions, it affects other people. But if we can surrender, and when I say we, I include myself, there's going to be a Narcotics Anonymous tomorrow. To be able to come to New Orleans and see something like this, when there was a time in my life, and there's a lot of people in this room that have had the same experiences, that would never believe that it would ever get to a point like this, is awesome. And to know how it's going to be and to know what it's going to be like, I don't know. But there's something that it's inside my gut that just grabs a hold on me, and it makes me feel real secure knowing that this many people want to live that have the same disease that I have and are doing something about it. And that's the we. We can recover together. And as I become to know a lot of people in this program, and I'll tell you, This weekend has been good to me. I've been able to meet a lot of people and share some special times and get to know people in a way that isn't just like with meetings. And that's special to me because I got like a lot of things going on in my life. That don't give me the freedom and don't give me the time to enjoy those. And to the people who you are, you know who you are, thanks. And as I've come to grow in this program, I found a lot of mothers and fathers, and I found a lot of sisters and brothers. And to those 6 or 7 people that came up here on your first night, if you're wondering what it's all about, and you don't have to listen to what I say to you tonight, but keep coming around, look us over. The streets are always going to be there. You can always go back out. But if you want what we have, and you're willing to do something about it, welcome home. Thank you.